Hi, I'm Donna Jordan from Jordan Fabrics. Today, I'd like to show you how to make a quilt called Wave Runner. It's a Cozy Quilt Designs pattern, and the nice thing about this is you can either use fat quarters or you can use layer cake squares. I'm going to use fat quarters. This is a set that my husband Matt cut out, and these are all Hoffman batiks, and we call them River Rock because this looks exactly like the Rogue River we have here in Grants Pass going through the middle of town. Those are the colors you will see there. I'm going to make the throw size. So I need 11 fat quarters. And it's not essential, but it's nice if you have the equal number of lights and darks because then you can get to that secondary wave pattern. So I'm actually going to use 12. I'm going to pick out 6 darks and 6 lights. These 12 should be perfect. The first step is to open each one up and iron it nice and flat so that when we cut it, we won't have any wrinkles and we can get nice accurate cutting. Our next step is to cut these into 8.5-inch squares. So you want to be a little bit careful because that's 17 inches of your 18-inch width here. So line them up pretty carefully so that you can get 2 strips at 8.5 inches. Okay, I've got all the squares cut, and you'll notice there's some extra big scraps here. And I want you to put those aside because I'm going to show you how to use those up later to make a fancy border. It's not in the pattern, but we've got a nice big piece and we can do something fun with those. Our next step is to take 2 of each color. So I've got 2 darker ones and 2 lighter ones, and we're going to stack them up. I've got them all right side up. It's a little hard to tell on batiks which is the right side and which is the wrong side, but if you're using printed fabrics, it's pretty clear. So make sure they're all right side up. And then take a pair of sharp scissors, and we're going to cut this almost along the diagonal, but we're going to curve it a little. So I'm going to start in the corner, I'm going to go up, curve a little bit this way, and curve a little bit that way, and end up in the far corner. Now take the top fabric and put it on the bottom of the stack, and we've got 2 pieces that we're going to sew together. We're going to sew these 2 together. So I'm going to put them right sides together. Then we're going to sew these 2 together. So we've got a little stack here. We're going to get 4 blocks and they're all going to be a little bit different. You don't have to cut each of the stacks exactly the same, and you don't have to start and stop exactly in the corner. It almost makes the quilt a little more interesting if you vary your cuts a little bit. So let's see, this time let's start near the corner and go that way, and then go up and finish off near the corner there. Same procedure where you take the top piece and move it to the back. And now we've got 1 block here, 1 block here. We're ready to sew the blocks together. They're already right sides together, and we've got 2 curves going different ways here. And you don't have to worry too much about lining it up exact. They will not line up perfect because we didn't add any seam allowances. So I'm just going to sew a couple of stitches there, and then I'm going to keep moving the pieces so that right where the needle is, there's a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So right now I'm going to be sliding this bottom one that way and this top one that way as I go. So I'm just sliding this one over and sliding the bottom one in the opposite direction. And at some point, because our curve changed directions, I now have to take the bottom piece and move it in the opposite direction and move that top one in the opposite direction. So just try to keep those edges lined up. They'll stretch a little bit, they won't match perfectly, and you don't have to worry about any of that. Just do your best to not be a perfectionist as you go around the curve there. Now we want the seam allowance to go towards the dark, so I'm just going to gently finger press this without stretching too much right along there. So it's not perfectly flat yet, and it's not perfectly square, but that's okay. Just sew them all just like that. The next step is to iron the blocks. These are not as flat as your normal patchwork would be because they don't have seam allowances added correctly, so they just are not going to lay completely flat. But use a dry iron and then add some steam, and you can see it's not perfectly square, but it's nice and flat now. Because we cut a gentle curve, it's pretty easy to get them ironed flat, and the ironing also steams out any stretchiness that came when we sewed there. Once they're all ironed up, we're going to trim them down. I'm just going to put it on my cutting board here, and I'm trimming it to 7.5 inches. So this is why we don't need to be hugely accurate when we're making them, because you can see how much I'm trimming off. So I'm going to move over here, not as much on this edge, and then we'll turn it sideways. And if you have a rotating cutting board, you can use that, and that will save you some time. But just trim a little bit off of all 4 sides, and what we'll end up with is a nice square flat patchwork block that has a pretty gentle curve in it. The blocks are all done, and we need 42 blocks to make the throw size. Since I had more fat quarters, I just kept making more blocks because they're really fun and easy to make. So I can make a really big quilt here. This is the traditional layout. This is the layout that's shown in the pattern. And right now I'm just putting the blocks in order. I'm not worrying about what fabric goes where because I don't think I will use 3 of the same print right in a row there. But I always find it easiest to put the colors the way they're supposed to go and then trade around to get the patterns mixed up. There, you can really see the ripples now traveling up the quilt. I have the colors all mixed, so the greens and the browns are all mixed, but there are enough that you could do one long trail in the browner ones and the next one in the greens. So there's a lot of options for changing your colors. You could do the lightest ones up in that corner and move down towards the darker ones here. But this layout looks really nice. There are other ways you can lay out the blocks. Because they're about half light and half dark, you can turn them to get lots of interesting patterns here. If this quilt looks a little familiar to you, it's because we did do a video with this exact pattern, with the Wave Runner pattern. I think it's been about 5 years ago, and I made it with all solids. I did solid reds and solid blues, and the pattern was really fun. But ever since I made that, I thought I would like to see this in different colors. I'd like to see it in prints, and I'd like to see it in batiks. There, the quilt looks totally different. It doesn't look like waves going down, but we've got these very abstract diamond shapes. There's a lot of movement in it. I'm not really sure which layout I'm going to use when I make the quilt, but in the meantime, let's work with those extra pieces. These are the scraps we had left over from cutting our squares. There's plenty so that we can get a couple of 3-inch squares from each of the darks, and then from the light ones, we're just going to get a 3-inch strip from each. The pattern calls for a very small inner border, this light border that goes all the way around. And this is what I've picked for that inner border. We're going to use the same amount that the pattern calls for, but we're going to blend this with these guys and make a patchwork border. We're going to cut 3 strips at 1 1/4 inches, and then we're going to cut that into a bunch of 1 1/4 inch squares. And then we're also going to cut 2 pieces at 3 inches, 2 more width of the fabric strips at 3 inches. I've got my big squares that we cut and these little ones here, and I'm at the sewing machine. We're going to stitch one of these onto each corner, and we're making what's called a snowball block. Mine hopefully won't look like snowballs when we're done. I'm hoping they will look like pebbles or river rocks. So what you do is line up the edges, even with the little square edges, even with the big square, and stitch along the diagonal. Now it's pretty little, so you can just point toward that corner and stitch right along the middle. You can mark it if you like, but it's so little, it's pretty easy just to aim and get it accurate enough. All we have to do now is press these little squares toward the outside. So press each one. You'll see the edges will still meet and it'll still be nice and square. And I like to trim off the back 2 layers to reduce the extra bulk there. So open it back up and cut so you're leaving about 1/4 inch of seam allowance. I'm back at the machine with my light scrap strips, my snowball blocks, and the border fabric. And here's how I'm going to put them together. I'm going to use 4 snowball blocks for each border. We'll just get 4 different ones. 3 of these guys. So we will start and end with a snowball block. It's a little bit long, but you get the idea here. I'm just alternating, ending with this guy. And then the long border pieces, all I'm going to do is take both strips and I'm going to cut it into 8 pieces. So I just simply folded it in half. This does not have to be an exact length. They're going to be a little bit longer than we need. So we're going to cut all these folds. We're going to end up with 8 pieces, and 2 of these, one will go on each end of this border. There's the pieced border. This will fit perfectly onto the size quilt, the throw size quilt that the pattern had us make. So I'll make 4 of these and we'll put 1 on each side. We'll just center them up and they'll be a little bit extra long, so we'll trim off the excess. So I'm going to go ahead and get the quilt stitched up and we can see how it turned out. The wave runner quilt is all done. This is the throw size from the pattern. It's 54 by 61 inches and it's laid out the way the pattern shows, with the rows going like this. And you can see how, because we cut each block a little bit different, that it makes it very interesting. It's got different shaped blocks depending on where they are, and you've got those nice paths of the green and brown all mixed. These did turn out looking to me like pebbles or rocks, so that's keeping in with the theme that I did of the river rock colors. One thing I want to show you, I picked out a border. I actually had a border stitched on here because I thought this fabric would look fantastic for the border. Once I got it on, I just found that the stripes were way too much, where they came together in the seams didn't look good. So I actually cut off all of those borders and put on this plainer border. So don't be afraid. If you put a border on and you don't like it, you're probably not going to like it better later. It's better to take that off right now and put on something that is pleasing. I couldn't resist. This is the bigger size quilt. This is the second quilt from all of the fat quarters. It's 8 by 9 blocks, so I made 72 blocks. I put borders on just like the pattern called for. And this layout is just so interesting. So I changed it a little bit. Instead of having the rows all lined up, they're offset a little bit. So it's a little high, a little low, a little high, a little low. And that gives the effect of still showing these interesting, almost diamond pieces, but you've got this pathway that zigzags throughout the whole quilt. And I just think this layout is different and interesting and really highlights all these nice batiks. I can't decide which layout I like the best. These long paths or these abstract diamonds, but I would like to know which one you like the best. So leave a comment and let me know, stripes or diamonds. Thank you so much for watching our tutorial. We hope you enjoyed it. At the end of each video, we do a giveaway. Today's giveaway is a big log cabin quilt. These are log cabin blocks alternated with a plain batik between them all. And it makes a very interesting quilt. I love the pattern we quilted it in, and look at the back. It's another batik there with all those swirls. And it's very easy to enter the giveaways. All you need to do is click the link right below this video that says giveaway and put in your name and your email address. You might win this quilt. Now, if you like our videos and you want to support us, the best thing you can do is subscribe to our YouTube channel. That really helps us out. Happy quilting!